This video is brought to you by 3, bringing you 4G at no extra cost and some exclusive deals over at btech.com.
Hey guys, welcome to BTech. I'm Basil and this is the HTC One Mini 2. It's like a scaled back version of the HTC One M8. It's cheaper, it's £360 to £370, but at that price it's still not a cheap device. It feels premium, it looks premium, and it has a really decent feature set. 4.5-inch 720p display, front-facing stereo speakers, metal body, and a 13-megapixel rear-facing camera. You've also got the M8's 5-megapixel front-facing camera, so you can take the perfect selfie. Is it a good phone though? After a week of use, what do we think? Would we recommend you buy one? Well, this is our full review, so you're in the perfect place to find out. The One Mini 2's design looks very similar, unabashedly so, to the HTC One M8. You've got that gorgeous gunmetal backing, you've got boom sound speakers, and you've also got the same overall shape, ergonomic, rounded, sits very comfortably in the hand. As far as key design highlights go, those boom sound speakers are beautiful, really adding a sense of identity to HTC phones now. You've also got a front-facing 5-megapixel camera and that display, which we'll come on to later, 4.5 inches of 720p goodness. Right-hand side micro SD card slot, and you've got a silver volume rocker. Down at the base is a micro USB port. On the left-hand side, nano SIM tray, and up at the top, 3.5mm jack and a power button. Flipping it around, 13-megapixel rear-facing camera, flash, and that plastic strip is the NFC point. Like we said, it does feel very premium and look like the HTC One M8, but it isn't the same. It isn't a unibody device. This has a plastic banding around the whole body. It's introduced in a very cohesive way though. Rather than look like the HTC One Mini with its prominent white plastic banding, this is very subtle and again adds to the real premium factor. This isn't a cheap phone, costing around £360 to £370, and it certainly doesn't feel like one. The screen on the HTC One Mini 2 is 4.5 inches, 720p, and it looks pretty glorious. If we pull in closer into frame and just thumb through the UI, you can make out the LCD panel really does deliver decent amounts of sharpness, 326 ppi, same as the iPhone 5S, but you've got more screen to play with there, with it being 0.5 inches bigger. We can also open up a color chart and compare it against the HTC One M8. This is one of our favorite flagships in terms of screen color accuracy at the very least. It's not hyper saturated, admittedly. It's much more tapered saturation, but the whites are incredibly accurate. You can see they're very similar whites, although the One Mini 2 is slightly bluer, so just slightly less accurate against our eye. If we pull in the Sony Xperia Z1 Compact into frame, you can see the Z1 Compact is much more saturated. The whites are also yellower and there's less tonal variation across the blacks. You've got much more differentiation between the lower points of the blacks. So it's actually a better panel than the Sony Xperia Z1 Compact. All in all, at 4.5 inches therefore, and in the mid-range space, the screen is yet another highlight of the HTC One Mini 2. Inside the HTC One Mini 2, it's Android 4.4.2, so the latest version of Google's operating system, and you've also got Sense 6, which is HTC's latest user interface. This gives you a virtually identical experience to that of the HTC One M8. So it's not just the look, it's also the UI too. If we power off the screen though and double tap, we won't actually be able to access the phone. There's no double tap to wake, there's no swipe to unlock or anything like that. So HTC's motion launch features aren't on here, but inside everything looks the same. That means you've got a variable number of home screens. We can pinch through and we can add new ones and remove. We can also see we've got widget menus in a very traditional HTC handling sense. You can jump through to blink feed, vertically scrolling list of news feeds, and we can also see we can tweak what we actually show at any given time across Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Google+. Aside from social content, you can also use blink feed to access news. So if we press add content, there are a range of service providers across a number of key categories. We can even add our own RSS feeds on here, so it's really nice and versatile. Jumping through to the applications tray, we can see it's a vertically scrolling list, really nice and cohesive with the long design of the phone, and it's very customizable too. We can change the grid size to 3x4 or 4x5. You can also hide applications as well as uninstall them through here and rearrange things in your own order, alphabetical or most recent as well. Generally, therefore, with such great levels of optimization, making this feel like a flagship experience on a mid-range device, HTC has pulled it out of the bag with the HTC One Mini 2's UI. The camera combination is very respectable on the HTC One Mini 2. 5 megapixel front-facing camera with an f2.8 lens and a rear-facing 13 megapixel camera with an f2.2 lens. You've also got a single LED flash as opposed to a dual LED flash on the M8 and no duo camera like you do on the M8 as well. Naturally, the M8 being a 4 megapixel camera, it won't be as good pulling through loads of detail in good lighting. The HTC One Mini 2 pulls out a stonking amount of detail in good light by comparison. However, when the lights dim, that's when you'll wish you had a flagship M8 with you. The flash does a really good job of lighting things up, but noise in the form of grain and also post-processing, softening, really does hit hard with this thing. You do have all the shooting modes that you'd expect from a flagship though, and these include panorama and HDR as well. HDR does a really good job of pulling through a little bit of extra tone throughout high contrast scenarios. What you can also expect are all the manual shooting modes too that you had on the M8 with the new Sense 6 camera experience, and that includes the option to do things like light trails or slow shutter speed or just lock in on macro. It's really nice and versatile, so it delivers a premium shooting experience in general, despite the fact this isn't a flagship phone. Selfie shot on the HTC One Mini 2 look good. They don't look amazing, and again, low light performance isn't going to be fantastic with that f2.8 lens, but still they're going to give you better levels of detail than you'd expect from most front-facing cameras, and this can shoot front-facing 1080p video, and this in good lighting looks absolutely fantastic. As far as video in general goes, in fact, it's actually one of the high points of the phone. Tap to focus works a treat. It's really decent resolution, obviously at 1080p, and it looks like it's 1080p video. It hasn't got optical image stabilization on it, but it kind of still manages with its digital image stabilization to pull out a decent take. The multimedia experience on the One Mini 2 really does pivot around those speakers. Boom sound stereo speakers, doesn't perform quite as well as the HTC One M8, but it is not far behind at all. It's going to make watching a YouTube clip just feel like a more immersive experience. Netflix would easily get through a whole episode on Netflix with this thing using just the front-facing speakers. Also, if we take a look at games, you can see we've got Modern Combat installed on here, Modern Combat 4, and it plays back perfectly. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 400 handles everything brilliantly. Holding the phone in landscape, we couldn't cover the speakers up for love nor money, so it's exact opposite, for example, to the Sony Xperia Z1 Compact. Obviously, it can handle 2D games, therefore, like Rayman Jungle Run, King of Fighters, and the only limitation really when it comes to gaming is that internal memory, which is 16 gigabytes, which is totally respectable for the price point. On the subject of performance, generally speaking, whether it's throughout the UI or in applications that weren't just games, you can see we have loaded this thing up. The device performs brilliantly. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 400 processor, 1 gig of RAM combination, has really proven itself on the Motorola Moto G and does exactly the same all over again on the HTC One Mini 2. Even if this is a more premium device, you can handle premium experiences on it. What's more, we're guessing this will slow down in time, but we didn't experience any slowdown, and the UI, as we said earlier, is beautifully optimized. If you are really heavily into your gaming, then you may want to invest in the Snapdragon 800 device, but if generally you just want to play a couple of games and want a really seamless experience throughout the user interface and that Sense 6 experience for less money than the One M8, this is very easy to recommend. Connections are also really good. You've got 4G, obviously 3G, naturally Bluetooth, GPS, Wi-Fi, NFC using the contact point at the back, and we really wouldn't want anything else on here except for maybe wireless charging and an infrared blaster, which we have to note this thing emits by contrast to the HTC One. The battery on the HTC One Mini 2 is a 2100 mAh cell. There's an extreme power saving mode to squeeze more juice out of it, but generally speaking, we could easily get a day out of this without trying too hard. If you do use the screen heavily, play a lot of games, that will be significantly less, and we found screen usage was the main dictator, obviously, as to how much battery life you get out of this. Activate extreme power saving mode and you can see that it's going to conserve CPU usage by reducing screen brightness, turning off vibration feedback and data when the screen's off, so kind of like battery stamina mode. It'll only allow essential applications to run and also turn off the pedometer, and it also changes the UI. So you can see you've got this significantly simpler user interface experience that allows you to access key elements only. It's a tricky one with the HTC One Mini 2. On the one hand, you do have specs that we've seen before on the likes of the Motorola Moto G4G. You've got a 4.5-inch 720p display, in addition 4G connectivity and that quad-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 400 processor with 1 GB of RAM. Having said that, what HTC brings to the table which warrants that price bump up to around £360–370 is that beautiful metal frame. The styling of it just looks exactly like the HTC One M8 but smaller. In addition, those boom sound speakers completely transform that multimedia experience, giving it a real edge over virtually every device in the price category. The screen looks great. It isn't the sharpest out there, but you really won't be able to notice using it day to day. And so for anyone who wants a smaller device, doesn't want the bulk of a flagship, and wants something that feels a little bit more premium than most of the plastic devices out there, the HTC One Mini 2 should definitely be a consideration. Hopefully you've enjoyed our review. Please, if you like the video, click like. If you like the channel in general, subscribe. Make sure you head over to BTech. Over there you can find the latest in smartphones, tablets, smart gadgets, and obviously awesome deals as well. Thanks for watching.
At the top of the screen is where you can find 3 hand-picked videos for your viewing pleasure. On the left is where you can subscribe, and on the right hand side you can find some exclusive deals if you head over to btech.com.